The alien city of Corin 5 was loud in the daytime and cool at night. Tall metal towers blocked most of the sunlight, and the streets always smelled of smoke, oil, and fear. But the worst place in this city was the trash yard. A huge ground full of broken machines, useless metals, old food, and rejected living beings. Every morning, giant trash trucks came and dumped mountains of waste into the yard. The workers never looked back. For them, trash was just trash. And sometimes, the trash included things that once breathed, lived, and cried. On the far left side of the yard, behind a half-broken metal bin, a tiny alien girl hid. She was thin like a stick, her skin pale blue, her hair full of dirt, and her eyes too big for her small face. Her name was Leary, but no one in the city used her real name. They called her Vermin, a word used for all unwanted children. A word that meant, not important, not needed, not human, not alive enough to matter. No one cared where Vermin came from. No one cared what they felt. If someone found them, they kicked them away or threw them in the burning pit. Leary had run from those people for months. She lived in the trash yard because it was the only place everyone avoided. Tonight, she sat curled like a shaking ball, hiding from the cold wind. Acid rain had fallen an hour ago, burning her arms as she tried to protect her face. Her clothes were too thin, full of holes, and half burned. Her left leg hurt badly. She had stepped on a sharp metal piece last week, and the wound never healed. Leary pressed her small hands on her ears as she heard angry voices outside the fence. "Check the yard." One of those things escaped again. It must be hiding somewhere. If you find it, throw it in the pit. She trembled silently. They were searching for her. She tried not to breathe loudly. She tried not to cry. She tried to make herself invisible, but tears still rolled down her dirty cheeks. She wiped them quickly with her sleeve, afraid even her tears might make a sound. Hours passed, and finally, the voices faded. Leary relaxed a little, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "You are still alive. Still alive." She was used to talking to herself. No one else ever talked to her gently. Then, suddenly, she heard a strange metal gate opening. Clank. Screech. Leary's heart jumped. Someone was entering the trash yard. A shadow moved across the dim lights. Heavy boots crushed broken metal under them. A tall figure slowly walked inside, carrying a small tool bag. Leary froze. The last person she wanted to meet in this place was a worker. Workers never liked vermin. They treated them worse than trash. The figure took a few more steps, and the weak light from the lamp above showed his face. He was not alien, he was human. A man in his late 20s. Tired face, rough beard, old jacket, and a small flashlight in his hand. His name was Rowan Hawley, a scrap collector who lived on the edge of the city. He came every week to find metal parts for his repair shop. He did not care about city rules. He only cared about surviving another day. Tonight, Rowan looked frustrated. His shop had almost no customers. He needed good metal parts, or he would not earn enough to pay rent. He walked between piles of trash, kicking aside old pipes and wires. "Nothing useful here," he said to himself. Sighing. Then he heard it. A small, soft sound. A whimper. Rowan stopped walking. He listened again. Whimper, whimper. At first, he thought it must be a broken animal bot. But the sound was too real. Too painful. Too alive. He looked around with his flashlight. Nothing moved, but the sound came again. This time it was weaker, like someone was giving up. Rowan followed the sound and stepped near the metal bin where Leary hid. He paused when he saw something shaking behind the bin. "Hello?" He called softly. "Lir," I gasped. Her whole body froze. She pressed her hands on her mouth to stay quiet. Rowan carefully moved closer. He lifted the flashlight, trying not to scare whatever was hiding there. Slowly, Slowly, he saw a small pale face, big fearful eyes, and thin trembling arms. A child. A girl, not human. But alive. Rowan's eyes widened. What are you doing here? He whispered. "Lir." I crawled back, terrified. She expected him to kick her, shout at her, or drag her to the burning pit. That was what all workers did. She whispered in a broken voice, "Please. Please don't hurt me." Her voice was so tiny that Rowan felt something twist painfully inside his chest. This was not a dangerous creature. This was a terrified little girl. He lowered the flashlight so the light wouldn't hurt her eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. Leary shook her head fast. "You will. Everyone does. I'm Vermin." Rowan frowned. He knew what that word meant in this city, and he hated it. "No," he said firmly. "You're a child." Leary blinked in surprise. No one had ever said that to her. Rowan noticed her bleeding leg. The wound looked deep, infected, and painful. She tried to hide it behind a piece of cloth, but the bloodstains were clear. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She didn't answer. She was too scared. Rowan slowly put his tool bag down and knelt. "Look, you're hurt. You can't stay here. This place is dangerous." Leary shook her head again. No, if I leave, they find me. They throw me away again." Her small voice cracked. Her whole body trembled like a leaf in a storm. Rowan felt anger inside him, not at her, but at the city that treated a child like this. He reached his hand forward, very slowly, giving her time to pull away. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. "Come with me." Leary stared at his hand. In her whole life, no one had ever offered a hand like that. She whispered, "Why? Why help me?" Rowan gave a sad smile. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago." Leary hesitated. Her eyes moved to his hand, then to his face, then back to his hand. Finally, with a shaking breath, she placed her tiny fingers on his palm. Rowan gently lifted her into his arms. She was so light, too light, like she had not eaten properly for weeks. But before they could leave, a loud alarm echoed across the yard. Beep, 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 beep. Rowan turned quickly. Bright lights activated. Gates started closing. Someone had noticed movement in the trash yard. Rowan held Leary close and whispered urgently, "Hold on to me." She wrapped her arms around his neck, scared. Rowan ran across the yard, jumping over metal piles, avoiding falling scraps, while Leary hid her face against his chest. Behind them, the gates locked. Voices shouted orders. Searchlights scanned the ground, but Rowan squeezed through a broken fence panel he had discovered months earlier, a small gap only he knew about. He slipped out into the dark alley beyond the fence. Holding the trembling Leary in his arms, they escaped. Leary whispered in disbelief, "You saved me." Rowan looked down at her and nodded. "You're safe now." But deep in the shadows of the alley, two glowing eyes watched them leave. Eyes belonging to someone who knew exactly who Leary was, and would not stop searching. Rowan walked fast through the dark alley, holding Leary tightly in his arms. The acid rain had stopped, but the wind was cold and sharp. Leary buried her face against his chest, hiding from the world outside. She didn't know where he was taking her, but for the first time in her life, she felt a strange thing inside her chest. It felt like hope. Rowan's workshop was far away from the trash yard. He lived on the edge of the city where old buildings leaned like tired giants. Most people avoided his street because it looked broken and dangerous, but Rowan didn't mind. He liked quiet places where no one came to disturb him. When he reached his small metal door, he looked around to make sure no guards or searchlights were nearby. Then he unlocked the door and stepped inside with Leary. The workshop was messy but warm. Strange tools hung from the ceiling, machines sat half-broken on tables, and wires lay scattered on the floor. But in the middle of the room was a small heater that made the place feel safe. Leary blinked slowly. This place was nothing special, but compared to the trash yard, it felt like a palace. Rowan gently placed her on a soft cloth bench. "Sit here," he said softly. "You're safe." Leary hugged her thin arms around her knees and nodded. She didn't speak. She didn't know if speaking was allowed. Rowan walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small medical box. When he returned, Leary's eyes widened with fear. "Are you going to hurt me?" she whispered. Rowan shook his head quickly. "No, I'm going to clean your leg. It's infected. If we don't treat it, it will get worse." Leary looked down at her wound. The skin around it was red and swollen. She didn't know much about medical things, but she understood pain. She felt it every day. Rowan sat beside her and dipped a cloth in warm water. "This might hurt a little," he warned. Leary took a deep breath, bracing herself. When Rowan touched the cloth to her wound, she flinched but didn't pull away. She was used to pain. But the strange thing was, Rowan's hands were gentle. He cleaned the wound, wrapped it carefully, and taped the bandage. "All done," he said. Leary stared at her bandaged leg like she couldn't believe someone cared enough to fix it. "Thank you," she whispered. Rowan smiled softly. "You're welcome." He stood and walked to the kitchen corner. He opened a small food container and took out a piece of bread and a bowl of warm broth. When he placed the food in front of her, Leary stared at it with big eyes. "Eat," Rowan encouraged. She reached for the bread slowly, like she expected someone to slap her hand away. But no one did. She took a small bite, then another, and suddenly she started eating fast, almost too fast, like someone afraid the food would disappear. "Slow, slow," Rowan said. "You'll choke." Leary forced herself to slow down. She didn't speak while she ate. Rowan didn't ask questions. He knew she needed time. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and whispered, "No one has ever fed me before." Rowan didn't know what to say. His heart ached for her. He sat across from her and asked gently, "Do you have a family?" Leary looked down. Her fingers twisted the cloth of her dress. "I had a mother, but she left me when I was small. People said I was not normal. They said I was wrong." Rowan leaned forward. "Wrong how?" Leary hesitated. She didn't want to scare him, but she also wanted to be honest. "When I get scared, strange things happen." Rowan raised his brows. "What kind of strange?" Leary lifted her hand slowly. She touched a metal spoon on the table. For a moment, nothing happened. But then the spoon bent by itself, without her using any force. Rowan's eyes widened. Leary quickly pulled her hand back, terrified. "Please don't send me away. I don't do it on purpose. I can't control it." Rowan exhaled slowly, trying to understand. "You can bend metal? Without touching it?" She nodded weakly. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck. He had seen many strange things in this alien city, but nothing like this. Leary continued in a soft voice. "People said I am not one species, but two, half alien, half something else. Something dangerous. They called me Vermin because they were afraid." Rowan shook his head. "You're not dangerous. You're just a child." Leary didn't answer. She wasn't sure if she believed him yet. Rowan stood and said, "You should rest. You've had a hard day." He walked to a small storage room and pulled out a thin blanket. He placed it next to her. "You can sleep here tonight." Leary looked at the blanket with disbelief. "I can sleep here," he nodded. "Of course." She slowly lay down on the bench, hugging the blanket around her. It was warm. It smelled clean. She closed her eyes, but even then her tiny body trembled. "Don't worry," Rowan said. "No one can enter this place without me knowing." Leary relaxed a little. Rowan watched her for a moment, making sure she was okay. Then he turned off most of the lights and went to the other side of the room to continue repairing a machine. Hours passed. Outside, the city was silent. Inside, the workshop was peaceful, until bang. A loud noise shook the metal door. Rowan jumped up instantly. Leary woke up with a terrified scream. Another bang. Something heavy hit the door again. Rowan ran to Leary and put a hand on her shoulder. "Stay quiet. Hide under the table." Leary crawled under the large work table, her heart racing. She curled up into a tight ball. Rowan grabbed a metal rod and walked toward the door. His breath was fast, but his expression was hard. He unlocked the small top panel and looked outside through the narrow, gapped out. 4 tall figures stood in the street. They wore dark armored suits and glowing visors. They were not city guards. They were hunters, bounty hunters, known for catching rare beings. Rowan's blood ran cold. Hunters never came without reason. They were here. For Leary, he tried to close the panel, but one hunter noticed the movement and shouted, "There! Inside!" Another hunter stepped forward and punched the door with an energy glove. The door bent inward. Rowan knew he could not fight them. He was human. They were trained killers. He rushed back to Leary. "Listen to me," he whispered urgently, kneeling next to her. "No matter what happens, do not come out. Understand?" Tears rolled down Leary's cheeks. "They will take me, like they took the others." Rowan shook his head. "No, I won't let them." Before she could speak again, the door burst open with a deafening crash. 4 hunters stormed inside. Rowan stepped in front of Leary's hiding place, holding the metal rod like a weapon. "Step aside, human," the lead hunter growled. "We're here for the creature." Rowan's hands tightened around the rod, even though he knew it was useless. "She's not a creature," he said. "She's a child." The hunters ignored him. They pushed him aside with a single hit, and he crashed into a wall. Leary screamed. The hunters moved toward the table. Rowan, dizzy and injured, stood up again. He grabbed the nearest broken machine and threw it at them. It hit the hunter's armor and barely shook him. The hunter raised his weapon. Rowan braced for pain, but before the weapon fired, something else happened. The lights flickered. The machines around the room buzzed. Metal tools lifted into the air like feathers. The air around Leary shimmered with invisible power. She crawled out slowly, her eyes glowing with bright violet light. The hunters stepped back. Startled, Rowan stared in shock. Leary's fear had awakened something inside her, something strong, something powerful, something the hunters deeply feared, and the room started to shake. The entire workshop shook as if a heavy storm had exploded inside it. Tools floated in the air. Screens flickered wildly. Sparks danced across the metal floor. The hunters had expected a weak little creature hiding under a table. They had not expected this. Leary stood in the center of the room, her thin body trembling, but her eyes shining bright violet. Her hair rose around her like it was underwater. The air itself hummed with pressure. The lead hunter raised his hand. "Careful. The hybrid is activating." Another hunter stepped back. "I thought these things were myths." Rowan, still leaning against the wall and bleeding from his head, looked at Leary with wide, shocked eyes, but not fear. Something else. A strange protectiveness stronger than any fear. Leary wasn't looking at the hunters. Her eyes were on Rowan. He was hurt. He had tried to protect her. He had called her a child when everyone else called her trash. And now he lay injured. Because of her. Her heart twisted painfully. Something inside her broke open. She didn't understand this feeling. But it was stronger than fear, stronger than pain, stronger than everything she had known. It was love. And love triggered her power beyond anything she imagined. A loud metallic groan filled the Workshop as every loose metal object rose into the air and pointed toward the hunters like sharp spears. The hunters stepped back in panic. Stop her. She's unstable, shield up. Take the human hostage. Rowan tried to stand, but his legs shook. Leary, stop. They'll hurt you. Leary didn't blink. Her small hands lifted, and the metal spears flew forward, smashing into the hunters' shields. The impact threw two of them backward into the wall. The third hunter tried to grab her, but machines from the tables flew at him, hitting his armor again and again like metal fists. The fourth hunter, realizing the danger, activated a stun grenade. A small orb glowed in his hand. He prepared to throw it. Rowan shouted, "Leary, move!" But Leary turned toward the grenade too late. The hunter threw it directly at her. For a moment, everything froze. Then Rowan moved, faster than he ever thought he could. He jumped toward Leary, grabbed her small body, and shielded her with his own. The grenade exploded. Light flashed. Sound roared. Electricity surged. Rowan screamed as the shock tore through him. Leary cried out, "Rowan, no!" Rowan collapsed, twitching in pain. Leary held his head in her lap, tears running down her face. "You shouldn't have done that. You'll die." Rowan forced a weak smile. "I told you. I won't let anyone hurt you." Leary touched his cheek with shaking fingers. Her tears fell on his face. Her heart felt like it was breaking. Behind them, the hunters regained their balance. "Grab the hybrid. The human is down." Leary looked up slowly. Her eyes glowed brighter, almost white. Her tears sparkled with energy. Her small hands shook, then steadied. The machines around the room suddenly stopped floating. They twisted into shapes, sharp, deadly, controlled. The air pulsed like a heartbeat. Leary stood up, stepping in front of Rowan like a tiny warrior. "You hurt him," she whispered. The hunters raised their shields again. "You don't have to love me," Leary said, voice trembling but strong. "But he does, and I will not let anyone take him from me." The energy in the air exploded. The workshop filled with swirling metal and electricity. The walls bent outward. Lights shattered. The ground shook with force. The hunters raised their weapons, but they were too slow. Metal coils wrapped around their arms. Machines crashed into their helmets. The floor plates rose beneath their feet and slammed them against the wall. The lead hunter screamed, "She's controlling everything, shut her down." But Leary walked forward, glowing like a small star. "You hurt my family," she said. "Leave." She lifted her hand. A massive wave of energy burst from her, knocking all four hunters out of the workshop and throwing them onto the street. Their armor cracked. Their weapons shattered. Their shields sparked and failed. They lay on the ground, groaning. Leary stepped outside and looked at them with tears still falling down her cheeks. "If you come again," she whispered, "I won't hold back." The hunters scrambled away, terrified. They had never seen a hybrid so powerful. They would report to their masters that the target was too dangerous to capture. The street went silent. Leary ran back inside to Rowan. He lay still, breathing weakly. Leary shook him gently. "Rowan, please wake up. I can't be alone again." He opened his eyes a little. The pain was clear on his face, but he forced a smile. "You're stronger than you think, Leary," she sobbed. "But you got hurt because of me." Rowan lifted his hand and touched her cheek weakly. "No," he whispered. "I got hurt because I chose to protect someone worth protecting." Leary held his hand against her face. Her tears glowed, literally glowing with faint violet energy. As the tears rolled down his skin, the wounds on his arm began to close slowly. His breathing steadied. His heartbeat strengthened. Rowan noticed this and whispered, "You can heal." Leary looked confused but nodded. "Only when I feel something strong." Rowan smiled weakly. Guess you care more than you admit. Leary blushed and lowered her eyes. She placed both palms on his chest and let her tears fall. They glowed brighter, spreading small energy waves into his body. Rowan groaned as pain faded and injuries closed. Within minutes, he was breathing normally. He sat up slowly, surprised. I feel fine. Better than fine. Leary wiped her eyes and laughed a little. I thought you were going to leave me. Rowan shook his head. I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever. She threw her arms around him and hugged him tightly. Rowan hugged her carefully, afraid of hurting her, but she didn't let go. After a long moment, he said gently, We can't stay here. Those hunters might return with more soldiers. Leary nodded. Then where do we go? Rowan looked out at the stars above the broken roof. Somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere far from the city. Somewhere you can grow, learn, live. Without fear. Leary looked up at him, hope shining in her eyes. You mean, a home? Rowan smiled softly and touched her small hand. Yes, Leary, a real home. She squeezed his hand. When you found me, I was sure my life was ending. But you lifted me from that trash and said I'm a child. You gave me food. You gave me warmth. And you gave me something I never had. Rowan tilted his head. What? A chance, Leary whispered. They both stood up. Rowan packed whatever he could, tools, food, a small bag of clothes. Then he held Leary's hand as they walked out of the workshop into the night. The city was dangerous. The world was bigger than both of them. Hunters might come again, but they were not alone anymore. A human and a hybrid child walking side by side. As they stepped onto the dim-lit road, Leary looked at Rowan with a small, hopeful smile. I will protect you now, she said. Rowan laughed softly. I think you already did. Together, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a city that had thrown her away, but keeping the only thing that truly mattered. Human who saw her worth, and a child who finally believed she was loved.